The ledger my mother concealed within her dresser was the very thing that proved they had plundered my tuition fund for mafia debts, and its discovery irrevocably altered everything in the courtroom. College was meant to be a whirlwind of midterms and late-night coffee sessions, not a labyrinth of dark secrets and chilling threats. A single phone call on an otherwise tranquil afternoon managed to flip my entire world inside out, and the voice on the other end of the line proceeded to shatter the very foundation of everything I thought I knew. What? The words echoed in my head, but I couldn't process their meaning. I had just spent a perfect day completely captivated by my classes. There was Introduction to Psychology, where the professor had us all chuckling while dissecting Freud's theories. Then Creative Writing, where we had already started crafting our own short stories, and even Statistics, which, with the right instructor, was proving to be surprisingly fascinating. I was perched on a bench just outside the campus library, basking in the feeling that my life was finally, truly beginning, when my phone rang. My mother's voice on the line sounded disturbingly cheerful for someone who was about to dismantle my future. "We need you to listen very carefully, honey. We're unable to pay for your school any longer. What happened to the college savings account you've been contributing to for me since I was a baby?" My own voice came out as a hoarse whisper. They would proudly show me the statements on each of my birthdays, letting me watch the numbers climb, using it as a motivational tool whenever I groaned about studying for the SATs. That money was supposed to be sacrosanct, untouchable. It was mine. A tense silence hung in the air before my father cleared his throat. "I ran into some problems. We're going to need all of that money to settle some debts." The explanation was infuriatingly vague. He didn't specify what kind of obligations they were. Then what am I supposed to do? A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt like I was going to be sick. My mother quickly interjected with her pre-packaged solution. "You need to find a wealthy boyfriend by the end of the month. You attend a school with plenty of rich students, and you have a good figure, so it shouldn't be too difficult for you to secure a boyfriend you can turn into a husband." I sat there, utterly stunned, as she continued to speak. She laid out their entire, meticulously planned strategy. How I should target men in the business school, how I needed to dress more revealingly, and how I should laugh at all their jokes, even the ones that weren't remotely funny. "Even if he cheats on you, you can't break up with him, and then in 6 years, you'll be able to go back to school." She said it so casually, as if 6 years of my life were an insignificant footnote. Unable to fathom what was happening, I disconnected the call without even saying goodbye. My palms were trembling as I scrolled through my contacts to find my brother Aiden's number. He had graduated from law school the previous year and had always been the one who could fix things. He answered on the second ring. "They just told me they can't pay for college and that I need to find a rich husband." Is this actually happening? I was desperately trying to keep my voice from breaking. Aiden let out a long, heavy sigh. They pulled the same thing on me when I first started college, and I actually believed them. What? The nightmare just kept getting worse. He explained that 7 years ago, they had called him with the exact same story, the same ambiguous debts, the same ludicrous solution. But he was too proud to marry for money, so he dropped out and started working as a welder to save his own funds. He spent years inhaling toxic fumes and burning his hands just so he could eventually put himself through law school. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked, my voice laced with hurt. I guess I hoped they had changed, that maybe they'd learned their lesson. I kept hoping they wouldn't do the same thing to you. The bitterness in his voice was sharp and painful. We sat in silence for a moment. I watched other students walk by, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, coffee cups in hand, living their normal college lives, completely unaware that I was being told by my own parents to sell myself to the highest bidder. "There's something else you need to know," Aiden said finally. "Our parents are connected to the mafia." The mafia? Like the actual mafia? This was beyond insane. Dad's gambling problem wasn't just at local casinos. He owes a significant amount of money to some extremely dangerous people. That's why they need your college money so badly. That's why they're desperate enough to pitch this insane husband idea. My brain struggled to process this new, terrifying information. My parents, the people who drove a minivan and attended church every Sunday, were involved with organized crime. My father, the man who wore polo shirts and told terrible dad jokes, was indebted to actual criminals. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Aiden's voice dropped as if he was afraid someone might overhear. "I have a plan to get your money back, but it's going to require both of us, and you have to trust me completely." "What kind of plan?" I needed details, not over the phone. "Can you drive home this weekend? We'll meet at my apartment and I'll explain everything. Just whatever you do, do not let Mom and Dad know we've spoken." Act like you're actually considering their marriage proposal. "Aiden, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. These people are not to be trifled with, but I'm not going to let them destroy your future the way they almost destroyed mine. We're going to fix this." I ended the call and remained on the bench for another minute, my entire body shaking uncontrollably. Students continued to stream past me as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis, but for me, everything was different now. My legs felt like jelly as I forced myself to stand and walk back to my dorm. The building felt too bright, too loud, with everyone buzzing about their Friday night plans. I finally made it to my room, shut the door behind me, slumped down at my desk, and opened my laptop. My class schedule stared back at me. Introduction to Psychology on Mondays and Wednesdays, creative writing on Tuesdays and Thursdays, statistics 3 times a week. I might not be able to finish any of them because my parents owed money to real-life mobsters. My hands were still shaking as I picked up my phone and began meticulously deleting everything. My call history with my mom and dad, their text messages, everything was wiped. One by one, I changed all of my passwords, making them longer and more complex. My email password, my banking password, everything. Creating a new, secure email account took longer than it should have because my fingers kept fumbling on the keys. Aiden had told me to download Signal for secure messaging, so I went to the App Store and set it up, using a username instead of my phone number. I sent him a message confirming I'd drive to see him tomorrow, and he replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Just then, my regular email dinged with a new message from the bursar's office, a stark reminder that tuition was due in 3 weeks, $30,000 for the semester. Money my parents had supposedly saved for 17 years was now gone, used to pay off criminals. Staring at that number made me feel sick to my stomach. I forwarded the email to my new secure account and then deleted it from my primary inbox. My roommate stumbled in around midnight, drunk and laughing about some party. She collapsed onto her bed, and I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, I could hear people laughing and talking about their normal lives. Someone was complaining about a chemistry exam, and someone else was planning to ask a girl out. They were worried about typical college problems, while I was preparing to secretly record my own parents. In a building filled with hundreds of people, I had never felt more profoundly alone. My alarm blared at 7 a.m., meaning I must have fallen asleep at some point. My roommate was still passed out, so I moved quietly, pulling my small suitcase out from under my bed. I packed the folder I had kept since high school, which contained all the documents related to my college savings. They had shown me the statements every birthday, and I had saved copies, along with screenshots of their texts promising the money was all mine. I included photos of my parents at my high school graduation, talking about how proud they were, mentioning that while I had a full ride to my safety school, they wanted me to attend my dream school. Anything that proved that money existed and was designated for me. I sent Aiden a message on Signal, letting him know I was leaving at noon as we had planned. My roommate stirred and asked where I was going. When I told her I was visiting family for the weekend, she just mumbled something about having fun before rolling over and falling back asleep. I threw some clothes into the bag and headed for my car. The drive to Aiden's apartment usually took 2 hours, but today I found myself constantly checking my mirrors. About 30 minutes into the drive, I noticed a dark sedan that seemed to have been behind me since I left campus. It wasn't tailgating, but it was always there, maybe 3 or 4 cars back. When I switched lanes, it switched lanes. When I took the exit for Route 85, it took the same one. My heart started pounding in my chest. I memorized the license plate and made an abrupt turn into a rest stop. The sedan followed. I pulled into a parking spot near the main building and watched as the sedan parked a few rows away. No one got out. I called Aiden, trying to keep my voice steady. He told me to get back on the highway and continue driving to his place as if everything was normal. He warned me not to try and lose them, as that would signal that I had spotted them. So I got back in my car and drove the rest of the way with that ominous sedan a constant presence 3 cars behind me. When I finally pulled into Aiden's apartment complex, the car drove past and turned at the next corner. I grabbed my suitcase and practically sprinted inside. Aiden was waiting for me at his door and pulled me into a tight hug the moment he saw me. I hadn't cried until now, but in the safety of his arms, I couldn't stop. He held me as I sobbed into his shirt, the weight of the last 24 hours crashing down on me all at once. When I finally composed myself, he led me into his kitchen. The table was completely covered with paperwork, bank statements, printed emails, and photos of documents. He had been gathering evidence against our parents for months, maybe even years. We laid everything out and began organizing it chronologically. Aiden opened his laptop and showed me a spreadsheet he had created, tracking every single deposit and withdrawal from my college account. The withdrawals lined up perfectly with dates he had marked in red on a calendar. As we sorted through the papers, he explained his plan: document everything, record every interaction, and build an undeniable legal case. He showed me the recording app on his phone and demonstrated how to use it discreetly. Then, he handed me a tiny microphone that clipped inside the collar of my jacket, nearly invisible. We practiced turning it on and off until I could do it by feel alone. He had also written down the contact information for 2 people who could help us. Evelyn Carter was a staff member in my school's financial aid office who specialized in emergency situations. Lucas Grant was a detective who focused on organized crime cases, someone Aiden knew from some pro bono legal work he had done for the police department. Just knowing the names of people who could help made the situation feel slightly less impossible. After we had sorted and copied everything, Aiden had me sit across from him at the table. He role-played as our parents while I practiced staying calm and asking the right questions. We went through the scenario several times, and he coached me on which phrases to use to elicit legally useful responses. Sunday morning, I woke up on Aiden's couch with a stiff neck from sleeping at an odd angle. I pulled out my phone and looked up the number for the school's financial aid office. The website said they opened at 8 a.m. on Monday, but I found an email address for Evelyn Carter, the person who handled emergency cases. I drafted a message explaining that I was facing a family financial emergency and needed urgent assistance. My hands shook as I typed. Writing it all down made it feel more real, and I had to delete and rewrite the email 3 times before it sounded remotely normal. Aiden came out of his bedroom with 2 cups of coffee and sat beside me as I attached copies of all the bank statements we had organized, proving the college fund existed and was meant for me. He helped me write a brief summary of the situation, explaining that my parents had taken the money, but we left out the part about the mafia and gambling debts for now, figuring that would sound too outlandish for an initial email. Within an hour, Evelyn replied. She said she could meet with me at 7:30 on Monday morning before her regular office hours. It meant I'd have to leave for campus incredibly early, but it also meant I was getting help. I packed all the documents into my folder and drove back to college that afternoon. Aiden followed me for the first 30 minutes to make sure the dark sedan wasn't trailing me this time. Back in my dorm room Sunday night, I sat on my bed for a full 10 minutes, just staring at my phone. Finally, I messaged my mom, telling her I'd been thinking about what she said and wanted to know more about her plan for me to find a boyfriend. She called me instantly, her voice practically buzzing with excitement, as if I had just announced I'd won the lottery. As she started rattling off instructions about which dining halls the business school guys frequented and what times they went to the gym, I activated the recording app Aiden had shown me. I held the phone slightly away from my ear so the microphone could pick up everything clearly as she advised me to wear tighter clothes and laugh more, even if nothing was funny. She went on for 20 minutes, detailing how I should feign interest in whatever they talked about, never disagree with them, and always let them think they were smarter than me. Then my mom said something that made my stomach clench. Dad's friend, Victor, knew some wealthy families with sons my age who might be interested in meeting me. She dropped his name so casually, as if he were just a normal family friend and not a criminal my father was indebted to. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. I asked who Victor was, and my mom just said he was someone Dad did business with sometimes, someone with connections to affluent people who could help our family's situation. The way she talked about him, as if he were doing us a favor instead of threatening us, made me want to shout. But I kept my voice even and asked more questions about these families he knew. She suggested Victor could arrange some introductions if I was serious about this plan. I assured her I was, even though every fiber of my being wanted to hurl my phone across the room. After we hung up, I saved the audio file and took screenshots of her subsequent texts, which included a list of all the ways I should change myself to attract a rich husband. Monday morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. I got dressed and grabbed the folder of documents before walking across the dark, quiet campus to the financial aid building. Evelyn was already there, unlocking her office. She looked exactly like her picture on the website, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and glasses on a chain around her neck. She had me sit down and lay out all my documents on her desk. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking pointed questions about when the money disappeared and how much was originally in the account. Her expression grew more and more concerned as she reviewed everything. She explained that while emergency funds were available for situations like mine, they required proof of genuine hardship, not just parents refusing to pay. A police report, she said, would significantly strengthen my case because it would prove this wasn't just a family dispute, but an actual theft of funds that legally belonged to me. I understood then that if I wanted to stay in school, I had to make this official and involve the police. There was no more pretending this would all just go away. After the meeting, I called Aiden from just outside the building and told him what Evelyn had said about needing a police report for the emergency funds. He said he would call his contact immediately. Within an hour, he texted me back. Detective Lucas Grant had agreed to meet with us unofficially to discuss our options. We set a meeting for Tuesday at a coffee shop near campus, a place where we could talk without being overheard, and Lucas could explain what involving the police would truly mean. That night, my mom started sending me photos of outfits she found online that she thought would help me attract wealthy men. Each one was more revealing than the last. She sent notes with each picture. "This one really shows off your figure, and boys love it when you show a little leg." I wanted to vomit as I read them, but I screenshotted everything for evidence. I texted back with feigned enthusiasm, saying the dresses looked great and asking where I could buy them, all while meticulously documenting how my own mother was pressuring me to effectively sell my body. On Tuesday morning, I met Lucas at the coffee shop. He looked like a regular guy in jeans and a button-down shirt, not a police officer, which helped me relax a bit. He walked me through the legal process of reporting financial crimes and explained how the mafia connection both complicated things and made them more serious from a law enforcement perspective. He offered to help us file what he called a controlled report, which would give us a case number for the financial aid office without immediately triggering arrests or notifying my parents that we'd gone to the police. His calm, methodical way of explaining everything made me feel safer, even as he repeatedly warned me about the very real dangers of dealing with organized crime figures. He offered to set up official recording equipment for my next call with my parents and coached me on what kinds of questions would help build a legal case without arousing their suspicion. He was adamant that I was not to meet anyone associated with Victor without police protection, emphasizing that these were not empty threats and the danger was very real. That evening, I had to go to a business school mixer to keep up my cover story with my parents. I asked Sophie, a girl from down the hall, to come with me for moral support. She didn't know the full story, but when I told her I needed a wingwoman for an awkward social event, she agreed without hesitation. That was just the kind of friend she was. The mixer was in the business school lounge, a room filled with guys in blazers talking loudly about internships and startup ideas. I stood there in one of my normal outfits, feeling completely and utterly out of place. I forced myself to talk to a few of them, to laugh at their jokes about market volatility or whatever, while Sophie made funny faces at me from across the room to keep me from losing my mind. Lucas came to campus Wednesday morning with a van full of surveillance equipment. He set everything up in an empty office the campus police let us use. He showed me how the system worked, explaining that everything recorded would be legally admissible in court if it came to that. He gave me a list of questions to weave naturally into the conversation and reminded me to stay calm no matter what my parents said, as any emotional outburst would make them suspicious. I called my mom at 2 p.m. with Lucas monitoring everything from his laptop. I asked about the timeline for finding a husband and what would happen with my tuition if I didn't find someone soon. She admitted that Dad needed the money immediately for his obligations. When I pressed her for more details, she used the word consequences, which made Lucas nod and jot something down. It was the kind of language that implied a genuine threat. Dad then cleared his throat and took the phone from Mom. His voice was a little shaky as he started talking about the payment schedule. He said they needed at least half by the following week, or a guy named Sandro would get involved. He caught himself mid-sentence and quickly said that certain people would be very upset if payments didn't start right away. Lucas's eyes widened, and he started typing furiously on his laptop, gesturing for me to keep Dad talking. Playing dumb, I asked Dad who Sandro was. He just mumbled something about him being an associate he knew from work before steering the conversation back to my hunt for a boyfriend. My hands trembled as I asked more questions about these associates and their payment deadlines. Lucas was documenting everything, writing notes on a pad next to the name Sandro. Dad was talking himself into a corner, mentioning specific amounts and dates that matched the withdrawals Aiden had found in their bank records. After 20 more minutes of coaxing details out of them about the debt and their plan for me, I hung up and just sat there, staring at Lucas's equipment. He played back the recording for me, confirming we had everything, especially the part where Dad let Sandro's name slip, a known alias for Victor. Thursday morning arrived far too quickly. At 8 a.m., Lucas and I met at the downtown police station. The place smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner, and the plastic chairs were filled with people who looked exhausted and worried. Lucas helped me fill out the official report, carefully detailing everything about the stolen college fund and the threats from my parents' creditors. The officer taking the report kept asking me to repeat parts of the story, as if she couldn't believe parents would do this to their own child. It took 3 hours to get through all the paperwork and questions, with Lucas by my side the entire time, making sure everything was documented correctly. When they finally handed me a piece of paper with the official case number, a long string of digits that made everything feel terrifyingly real, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. As we walked out of the station into the bright morning sun, the gravity of what I had just done, reporting my own parents to the police, hit me hard. Lucas put a reassuring hand on my shoulder and reminded me that this was about protecting myself from dangerous people, not about punishing my parents for their terrible decisions. I drove straight to the financial aid office with the case number and found Evelyn waiting for me with a stack of forms. She had cleared her entire morning to help me and had already started the paperwork for an emergency grant based on our first meeting. She entered the police case number into the system and explained how it would fast-track my application through the Extraordinary Circumstances Committee. The grant would only cover about 60% of this semester's tuition, but between a payment plan and a campus job, I would be able to stay in school. For the first time since that devastating phone call on the bench, I felt a flicker of hope that I might not have to drop out after all. Evelyn made copies of everything and gave me a folder with all my documents, telling me to keep it somewhere safe. That afternoon, as I was trying to study in my dorm room, my phone rang. My mom's cheerful voice on the other end made my stomach drop. She said that Victor wanted to meet with me to discuss options for our family's problem, framing it as if he were a helpful family counselor instead of a mob enforcer. She kept talking about how generous he was, how he was open to discussing various arrangements, but I could hear the tremor of fear beneath her forced cheerfulness. While still on the phone with Mom, I messaged Lucas, who replied instantly that we needed to control this meeting. Mom said Victor suggested Saturday at a coffee shop downtown, somewhere public and safe. A word so laughably wrong it almost made me scoff. After I hung up, Lucas called and started formulating a plan to have me wired for the meeting, with undercover officers positioned throughout the coffee shop. Meanwhile, Aiden was working on his own angle. He spent Thursday night drafting a legal document for our parents to sign. He emailed me a copy. It was a formal admission that they had misappropriated my education fund and owed me the full amount, plus interest. We both knew they would never sign it willingly, but Aiden insisted we had to try the civil route first before things escalated further. He was building multiple legal strategies at once, preparing for any direction this disaster might take. Lucas and I met at a different coffee shop on Friday morning to go over the plan for my meeting with Victor the next day. He showed me the tiny microphone that would clip to the inside of my jacket and the recording device that looked like a portable phone charger. He had me practice walking and sitting normally while wearing the wire, making sure it didn't show or make any noise. He pointed out where the undercover officers would be sitting and even showed me their photos, so I would know who was there to protect me. He would be across the street, watching with binoculars and coordinating everyone via radio in case anything went wrong. The objective was simple but terrifying. Get Victor to admit to the debt and the threats on tape without making him suspicious. That night, I sat at my desk, trying to eat a sandwich I'd bought for dinner, but my stomach was in knots. The idea of meeting a real member of the mafia tomorrow made everything feel surreal, and I was scared in a way I had never been before. Sophie knocked on my door around 9 p.m. She'd noticed how quiet I'd been all day and asked if I was okay. She brought a container of soup from the dining hall and just sat on my bed while I pretended to study. She didn't push for details. She just kept me company, talking about her own classes and her annoying roommate. Her quiet, steady support meant more than she could ever know, even if I couldn't tell her why I was so terrified. Saturday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and couldn't get back to sleep. I just lay there, my mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. I got dressed in the outfit Lucas had approved, double-checking that the wire was secure and hidden under my jacket. The coffee shop was only a 10-minute walk from campus, but it felt like the longest walk of my life. I got there 20 minutes early and ordered a small coffee with hands that were shaking so badly I dropped my change on the counter. I chose a table by the window, just as Lucas had instructed, and tried to look casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. Victor arrived right on time. He was dressed like any other middle-aged suburban dad, in khakis and a polo shirt. He smiled warmly and shook my hand as if we were there for a normal business meeting. He ordered a black coffee and sat down across from me. He was smooth and charming as he explained that my father owed him a significant amount of money from gambling losses accumulated over the past 2 years. He pulled out a small notebook and showed me a ledger of numbers, dates, and payments that made my stomach churn. He never raised his voice or made any overt threats, but when he talked about how family complications could affect everyone involved, he looked me directly in the eye, and his gaze was chillingly cold. He spoke of creative solutions, saying that smart young women who understood family obligation could help renegotiate difficult loans. When I asked what he meant by renegotiate, he smiled and said that certain social arrangements could dramatically reduce financial obligations. He even mentioned that if I were smart about marrying into the right kind of family, my father's debt could be reevaluated. Then he added a crucial detail. All payments had been funneled through the Powell Credit Union, which was the paper trail Lucas had been hoping for. I just nodded and tried to look thoughtful, all the while feeling nauseous, knowing that the wire was recording every vile word about selling me off to settle my dad's gambling debts. Victor finished his coffee and stood up, saying he would give our family some time to consider the options he'd presented. After he left, I stayed for another 5 minutes, just as Lucas had instructed, and then walked out, trying to look calm. The same dark sedan I'd seen before was parked across the street, with someone sitting inside, watching the coffee shop. I walked back to campus along the route Lucas had planned. He called me 10 minutes later to confirm that they had seen the car too. He said they were escalating security measures immediately and would have someone do a quiet check of my dorm. The reality that actual criminals were watching my movements and knew where I lived was more terrifying than I could have imagined. Sunday was an agonizingly long day. I spent it checking my phone every few minutes and jumping at every noise outside my dorm room. On Monday morning, I went to the Powell Credit Union with the account numbers Aiden had given me, hoping to get transaction records that would link Dad's use of my tuition funds to his gambling payments. The branch was a small one, tucked into a strip mall between a nail salon and a sandwich shop. I went up to the teller window and asked for copies of withdrawals from my college savings account, sliding my ID under the glass. The teller, a kind-looking woman in her 40s, typed on her computer for a minute and then frowned. She explained that due to privacy regulations, even though she could see my name was associated with the account, she couldn't give me any information unless I was an account holder or had a court order. I asked if there was any way around it, but she shook her head, looking genuinely sorry as she explained how strict federal banking laws were. I left empty-handed and called Lucas from my car to tell him what happened. He said he would start the subpoena paperwork immediately, while Aiden would explore civil legal options to get the records. That afternoon, Aiden drove to our parents' house armed with the document he had drafted, the one acknowledging they had misappropriated my college fund and owed me the money. I paced my dorm room, from my desk to my bed and back again, while I waited for his call. When he finally called 2 hours later, his voice was tight with anger. He said Dad had laughed at the document, refusing to sign it and calling us dramatic and ungrateful for everything they'd done for us. Mom had started crying during the argument, saying we were tearing the family apart over money. But then, something completely unexpected happened that changed everything. Aiden said that in the middle of the fight, Mom suddenly shot up from her chair, went into their bedroom, and came back with a small black notebook she had hidden in her dresser. She threw it on the kitchen table and burst into tears, confessing she had been keeping a secret record of every single bet, every loss to Victor, and every payment they had made using my tuition money. The ledger was filled with dates stretching back 2 years, with the numbers growing larger and larger as Dad's debt spiraled out of control. Mom had scribbled down phone numbers, meeting locations, and even the license plate numbers of cars that had come to their house to collect. She had known what was happening all along, but had felt trapped and terrified as she watched Dad's addiction worsen and Victor's demands escalate. Aiden took pictures of every single page as Mom sobbed and Dad screamed at her for betraying him. The entries in the ledger lined up perfectly with the dates and amounts of the withdrawals from my college account, creating an undeniable paper trail from my savings straight into Victor's pocket. Some of the entries even had notes like, used Rachel's money, or took from college fund, making it impossible for them to deny what they had done. Tuesday morning, I met with Evelyn at the financial aid office again and showed her copies of the ledger pages Aiden had sent me. She read through them carefully, her expression growing graver with each page. She said this was exactly the kind of evidence that would qualify me for the maximum amount of emergency aid, because it proved the illegal theft of educational funds. She made copies for my file, and then called in a colleague who specialized in helping victims of crime navigate the university system. The woman introduced herself as a campus advocate and offered to help coordinate between the police investigation, the financial aid office, and my professors if I needed extensions or academic accommodations. For the first time since this all began, I felt like the university was fully in my corner, fighting to keep me in school. That night, as I was trying to study in my room, Aiden called, his voice shaking. Someone had slashed all 4 tires on his car and left a note under the windshield wiper. It read, "Family pays family debts," written in stark block letters. He had already called the police and filed a report, and they were treating it as witness intimidation in connection with our case against Victor. Lucas was there within the hour and told us we needed to get to a secure location immediately. He drove us to a nondescript apartment building on the other side of town that the police used as a safe house for witnesses who needed protection. The apartment was basic but clean, with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and bars on all the windows. Lucas showed us how to use the security system and gave us a direct number to call that would have officers there in under 3 minutes. Lucas had me up early on Wednesday morning. We were going to set up another recorded meeting with Victor, where I would give him a partial payment to buy us more time. The real goal was to bait him into being more explicit about his threats and illegal activities, as the first recording wasn't quite strong enough to guarantee serious charges. We spent 2 hours in a conference room at the police station, practicing different scenarios and responses. Lucas coached me on how to ask seemingly naive questions that would force Victor to spell out his illicit operations. I practiced staying calm even when Lucas role-played threatening me, learning to control my breathing and keep my hands steady. The meeting was set for that afternoon at a different coffee shop, one closer to campus with more potential witnesses. I got there 10 minutes early, wearing the wire again, and ordered a small tea I didn't want. Victor showed up on time, sat across from me with that same phony, friendly smile. I took out an envelope with $500 in it, money Lucas had given me from an operational fund, and slid it across the table, asking for a receipt. Victor just laughed and said that in his line of business, they didn't use paperwork because receipts created headaches for everyone. I pretended to be confused and asked how I was supposed to prove I'd made a payment without any documentation. He leaned in closer and said his business was built on trust and reputation, and that he had ways of collecting from uncooperative families that didn't involve courts or paperwork. When I asked what kind of ways, he smiled and said that creative solutions often worked best, and that sometimes people needed motivation other than money to fulfill their obligations. He mentioned that accidents happen when people don't take their responsibilities seriously, and that family members sometimes find themselves in unfortunate situations. I nodded and asked how my father's debt would directly affect my brother and me. Victor said that family debts are family problems, and everyone plays a part in finding a solution, one way or another. After he left with the money, I sat there for 5 more minutes before walking back to the safe house where Lucas was waiting. He said Victor's comments about accidents and family members facing consequences were exactly what they needed for criminal threat charges. On Thursday morning, we all went to the courthouse. Aiden's lawyer presented our evidence to a judge in an emergency hearing. The judge reviewed the ledger, the police reports, and the transcripts of my recorded conversations with Victor. After an hour of arguments from both sides, she granted a temporary restraining order, freezing all of my parents' remaining assets while the criminal investigation was underway. This meant they couldn't sell the house, empty their bank accounts, or transfer any property until the court decided how much they owed me. My phone immediately started buzzing with calls from both of my parents, which I ignored. From now on, Aiden would handle all communication through his lawyer, ensuring everything was formal and documented. Friday morning, my mom's lawyer called Aiden's lawyer. She was offering to cooperate fully with the police investigation in exchange for leniency on any charges she might face. She provided a list of Victor's phone numbers, the addresses of the places where Dad met him to gamble, and the names of other people Dad owed money to from his card games. She even gave them the dates and times of upcoming games Dad was planning to attend, hoping to win back his losses. Her betrayal of Dad felt inevitable, but it was still devastating to watch my family completely implode because of his addiction and their crimes. That afternoon, I sat in the financial aid office as Evelyn processed my emergency aid application with all the new documentation. The system approved enough money to cover this semester's tuition, with a payment plan for the rest of my degree. She printed out the confirmation letter and walked with me to the bursar's office, where the financial hold on my account was officially lifted. I could stay in school. It would be tight, and I'd have to work more hours, but I was staying. Walking out of that administration building with my registration secured felt like winning a major battle in a war that was far from over. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message read, "Disappointed in your family's choices," and it included a picture. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a photo of my dorm building, taken from across the quad. I immediately called Lucas, who told me to forward it to him without responding. He documented it as evidence and promised to have an undercover officer on campus by noon. The threat felt very real, but at least I wasn't facing it alone. Aiden drove in that afternoon, and we spent the weekend working with a lawyer from his firm. We sat at his kitchen table, going over every document as the lawyer took notes. He suggested we try to negotiate a settlement where Victor would get a portion of the frozen assets in exchange for forgiving the debt and signing a legally binding no-contact order. It wasn't justice, but it might be protection. The lawyer typed up the offer on his laptop and sent it to Victor's counsel Sunday night. We didn't expect a quick reply, but one came Tuesday morning. Victor's lawyer agreed to negotiate, but demanded 70% of the frozen assets. I panicked and called Lucas, but he said this was actually good news. It meant Victor wanted to avoid a full-blown investigation. The lawyer countered with 50% and the non-negotiable no-contact agreement, which would make any future threat a criminal offense. The negotiation meeting on Wednesday was held at the lawyer's downtown office. I sat between Aiden and Lucas, with Victor and his lawyer across the conference table. No one shook hands. Victor looked smaller and less imposing under the harsh, fluorescent lights of the office. His lawyer did most of the talking, with Victor just nodding along. After 2 hours of tense back and forth, they agreed on 60% of the frozen assets to be paid through official channels, creating a paper trail for the authorities. Victor signed the no-contact order right there in front of us. Any future contact would be prosecutable. On Thursday morning, I went to the bursar's office with my emergency grant paperwork. The woman at the counter processed the deposit and helped me set up a payment plan for the remaining balance. I would owe $200 a month, which meant I needed a job. She mentioned the library was hiring and gave me the supervisor's number. I called right away and scheduled an interview for that afternoon. The library job paid minimum wage and offered flexible hours that worked around my classes. My new manager understood I might need time off for legal matters and said it wouldn't be a problem. The preliminary hearing on Friday was at the downtown courthouse. My parents sat at a separate table with their lawyer as the judge reviewed the case. Dad looked like he had aged 10 years in a month. Mom kept her gaze fixed on the floor. The judge ordered them to sign a lien against their house to secure my claim to the stolen money, meaning if they ever sold the house, I would get my college funds back first. Dad's hand shook as he signed the papers. Mom looked almost relieved that it was becoming official. They had to legally acknowledge what they had done, right there in court. The following week, their court-mandated treatment programs began. Both parents were required to attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Dad went every Tuesday and Thursday night. Mom had to attend family counseling sessions for enablers of addicts. The court would check their attendance records monthly. Dad was finally forced to admit he had a gambling problem after years of denial. Mom had to confront the fact that she had enabled his addiction and made excuses for him. It was the first step toward them taking responsibility. Lucas called on a Wednesday afternoon with some surprising news. Victor had been picked up during a traffic stop the night before. The officers found illegal substances in his car, and the evidence from our case compounded his problems. He would be tied up in his own court battles for months, too preoccupied to bother us. The immediate threat seemed to be lifting. My parents' lawyer contacted Aiden with a proposal for future communication. They suggested written updates only, with no direct contact for the foreseeable future. Any possibility of a future relationship was conditional on them successfully completing their treatment programs. The lawyer said they understood if I needed space to heal. I agreed to the terms. I needed time to process everything. Aiden supported my decision, saying there was no rush to forgive them. On Thursday, I went to the registrar's office to reduce my course load for the rest of the semester. Dropping from 5 classes to 4 would help me manage the stress. It meant graduating a semester late, but that seemed insignificant in the grand scheme of things. The advisor was understanding and helped me figure out which class to drop. I kept psychology, creative writing, and statistics, but dropped my elective. This freed up more hours for my library job, which I needed for the payment plan. After all the chaos, the simple routine of shelving books felt grounding and normal. My supervisor was a quiet woman who didn't ask personal questions. She showed me the system for sorting returns and then left me to work. Other students came and went, oblivious to my story. I helped them find books and check out materials, just another student employee. The ordinary rhythm of scanning barcodes and pushing the book cart through the quiet stacks felt like the most peaceful thing in my life. Aiden called on a Friday afternoon while I was sorting returns. He told me he'd decided to retake the bar exam next month, having put his career on hold to help me through this mess. He asked if I would help him study, and I immediately said yes. Helping each other felt like the only positive thing to come out of this. We created a routine. I'd quiz him on legal terms during my breaks at the library, and he'd help me with my coursework over video calls in the evenings. I made flashcards from his old bar prep books, and we'd go through them together, him reciting answers while I checked them. The routine gave us something normal to focus on besides lawyers, court dates, and whether our parents would ever get their lives together. 3 weeks into this new routine, I moved into a new dorm with a new roommate who knew nothing about what had happened. She was nice enough and mostly kept to herself, which was perfect for me. I wasn't ready to explain why I sometimes woke up in a panic about money. Sophie came over to help me unpack and hang posters, trying to make the room feel normal even when nothing was. She brought string lights and helped me arrange my desk just the way I liked it, not asking too many questions when I got quiet. I started seeing a counselor at Student Health Services twice a week to process everything. She kept reminding me that healing wouldn't be linear or easy. She taught me breathing exercises for when the panic attacks hit and helped me see that what my parents did was not my fault, no matter how much it sometimes felt that way. That same week, I went back to the bursar's office, where they formalized my payment plan with concrete numbers I could afford. My library job would cover the $200 monthly payment, and a small loan would cover the rest, even with graduating a semester late. The woman behind the counter printed out all the paperwork, highlighted the important parts, and showed me how to set up automatic payments so I'd never miss one. Seeing it all made official with stamps and signatures made me feel more secure than I had in weeks. No one could take this away from me. My parents' lawyer sent a large envelope to my dorm. It contained a formal letter of apology they had been required to write as part of their plea deal. I sat on my bed staring at it for 20 minutes before I finally opened it, my hands shaking slightly. They took full responsibility for taking my college money, for trying to force me into a marriage for financial gain, and for putting me in danger with their gambling debts. The letter was 3 pages long, a mix of legal jargon and their own words. I read it once, then filed it away in a folder at the bottom of my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to forgive them, but I was glad they had finally admitted what they did. Aiden and I talked about it that night and agreed we would consider contact again after they finished their treatment programs, but not before. My creative writing class became an outlet where I could finally channel all my pain into something productive. The professor assigned us to write about a life-changing event, and I wrote about sitting on that bench and getting that phone call from my parents. I didn't hold back. I poured all the betrayal, fear, and anger onto the page, making it as raw and real as it felt in my life. When I read it aloud in our workshop, the room went silent. The professor called it powerful and unflinchingly honest, remarking that trauma often produces the most honest art. After class, 3 different students came up to me individually, each sharing their own story of parents who had let them down, stolen from them, or chosen addiction over their family. The next morning, Lucas called with an update on the sentencing. He explained that Mom's cooperation with the investigation meant she received probation instead of jail time. Dad got mandatory gambling addiction therapy and community service, but he also avoided prison, which felt too lenient, though Lucas assured me it was standard for first-time financial offenses. I was both relieved and conflicted. Having my parents in prison would have been a whole other kind of trauma. Lucas said the case was now officially closed, and Victor's crew had mostly disbanded after his arrest, so we no longer had to worry about retaliation. That weekend, Aiden drove down, and we went to the bank together to open a new joint education savings account, this time in both our names. We set it up so that any withdrawal required both of our signatures, and monthly statements would be sent to both our addresses. Everything was transparent. We each deposited $50 to start it off. It wasn't much, but it felt symbolic, a way of rebuilding what was stolen. Every month, we'd each add whatever we could spare, him from his new job after passing the bar exam, and me from my library wages after paying my bills. A month later, I found myself walking past the bench outside the library where I had taken the call. The same kinds of students were walking by with their coffee and backpacks, worrying about exams and relationships and all the normal college things. I stood there for a moment, feeling like a completely different person from the girl who had sat there all those weeks ago. I called Aiden right then and there, just to hear his voice. Standing in the very spot where my world fell apart, I reminded myself that I wasn't alone anymore, and I never would be again. We kept all our security protocols in place long after the immediate danger had passed. Being cautious had become second nature. We kept our new phones and numbers, checked in with each other daily, and remained aware of our surroundings. Lucas still called once a month just to check in and remind us he was there if anything ever felt off. 6 months after that first phone call, My life had found a new, almost normal, rhythm. I spent the semester working extra shifts at the library and studying harder than ever. Aiden called one Thursday afternoon while I was shelving books to tell me he'd gotten his bar exam results. He had passed. He already had 3 interviews lined up. The following week, he started a job at a firm specializing in financial crimes and fraud. He sent me pictures of his new office, which had a view of a parking lot, and joked that our family mess had taught him more than any textbook ever could. Seeing him in his suit and tie, after everything he'd been through to get there, made me incredibly proud. My own grades started to improve now that I could focus on school instead of survival. My statistics professor pulled me aside after class to tell me my exam scores had gone up by 30%. In creative writing, I turned in a story about trust that left the workshop speechless. My psychology papers, instead of being rushed, now had comments like insightful and well-researched. By finals week, I was pulling all-nighters in the library for the same reasons as everyone else, to ace my exams. The grades were posted just before winter break. I made the dean's list with a 3.8 GPA. I took a screenshot of the email and sent it to Aiden, who replied with a string of 5 exclamation points. Lucas called that same week with one last piece of news. Victor's organization had completely crumbled. The arrest had spooked most of his associates, and the rest were either in hiding or had left town. He'd checked with his contacts. No one was talking about our family anymore. With Victor arrested and his lawyers busy with more serious charges, the entire operation had ground to a halt. I could finally stop looking over my shoulder when I walked to class. Spring registration opened, and along with my other requirements, I signed up for Introduction to Law. The pre-law advisor helped me map out a 3-year plan to get all the prerequisites for law school applications. Aiden mailed me his old LSAT prep books and gave me recommendations for the best professors. We started having weekly calls to talk about different fields of law and what kind of lawyer I wanted to be. He promised he would help me study for the LSAT when the time came, and that I would do better than he did. 3 weeks into the spring semester, a letter arrived from my mom, sent through her treatment program. My name was on the envelope in her shaky handwriting, and the paper felt thin between my fingers. Inside, she had written 2 pages about completing her program and coming to terms with what she had done. She asked if we could meet for coffee when I was ready, but that she would understand if I never wanted to see her again. At the bottom, she wrote that Dad was doing better, too, and hadn't placed a bet in 5 months. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer with my notebooks. Maybe someday I would be ready for that coffee, but not yet. Sophie noticed I was quiet that night and brought cookies from the dining hall. We sat on my bed, and I finally told her everything, from the very beginning. The phone call, the marriage plot, the mafia, recording my parents' Victor. She listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider during the dangerous parts. When I was finished, she just hugged me and said she'd known something was seriously wrong but never imagined it was this bad. She said she was worried when I kept disappearing and seemed so stressed, but she hadn't known how to ask. Having someone who knew the whole, insane truth and still treated me like a normal person felt better than I could have imagined. We started having weekly coffee dates where I could talk about legal stuff or family drama without having to explain the context. Summer came, and I worked full-time at the library, taking 2 online classes to catch up on credits. Aiden helped me find a cheaper off-campus apartment I could afford with my library wages and financial aid. We spent a weekend painting it together, and he installed extra locks on all the windows. By August, I had saved enough for the next semester's tuition and felt financially stable for the first time in almost a year. When sophomore year started, I walked onto campus feeling like a completely different person from the terrified freshman of the previous fall. My backpack was filled with books I had bought with money I had earned. My pre-law classes were challenging but fascinating, and my professors knew me by name. I had a regular study group and friends who invited me to parties where no one was trying to marry me off for money. Every week, Aiden and I talked about his cases, my classes, and sometimes just about normal things like movies or sports. My parents remained in their programs and sent updates through their lawyers, but they kept their distance, as we had agreed. The campus felt safe and familiar as I walked the same paths that had terrified me only a year before. Standing outside the library where it all began, I felt a sense of profound peace and the freedom that comes from owning your own future.